Well, hello, friends. Good to be with you. My name is Matt Markins, and it is just a delight to be able to talk about something that I think we're all passionate about, or otherwise we probably wouldn't be a part of this. So I'm going to tell you just briefly a little bit about myself. The title that I carry is President and CEO of the Awana Ministry. Essentially, we're an organization that works with churches and parents and volunteers in 103 countries around the world, 133 countries around the world. We work with about 65,000 churches, around 7,000 of those here in the United States. And we're pretty passionate about sharing the message of child disciple making. And over the last decade, we've really done a lot of research, 8 research projects over the last decade are really drilling into answering the question, like, what are the key factors? What are the leading factors that lead to lasting faith in children? Why? Even more so now, because we live in such interesting times, which is exactly what we're going to be talking about. So I'm going to share my screen. You guys know how this goes. It's a little clunky. You do the best you can, especially when you're on a Zoom trying to record. So here we go. So we're going to be talking about children's ministry in a new reality. So I've told you a little bit about who I am, my background, the organization that I serve with. But let me tell you what I'm most passionate about right here, which is just being a dad, being a husband, and being a family member. So my wife, Katie, she and I have been married 24 years. My son, Warren on the right in the gray, Hudson in the bow tie. I show this picture to say, we see pictures like this and we think, oh, you guys look great. Your life must be perfect. And, my family may not be as good looking as yours, but we do have this feeling when we see pictures like this of this is Instagram ready, right? But here's the thing. In my family, we've had our challenges. Like we've been on the floor in the fetal position crying because we've had a bad night of anxiety. We've had seasons of depression in our home. We've had faith crisis where our kids ask really hard questions and say, how do we know these things are true? And so I say all that to say we are right beside you in discipling our kids, in raising them, and loving them and walking beside them and pointing them to love and follow Jesus for a lifetime. So that's been mine and Katie's pursuit professionally, has been asking that question. What is it the local church does that leads to lasting faith in kids? So let's talk about that. So with gatherings like this, one of the delights when we gather together, whether it's online or in person, is we have all the generations coming together. And sometimes I like to talk about, like, hey, talk to me each generation. Who are your favorite pop artists of your day or rock artists of your day? And I'm a Gen Xer, and the leading selling artist of the 1970s, about the time I was born and when I was growing up, was a man named Elton John. He had this song called Rocket Man. I want to talk about as an opening illustration of this song. A couple of years ago, my sons were in youth group, and I was volunteering in youth group. And as the youth group was rolling out, my sons went to go do that normal post-youth group cultural norm known as Taco Bell, and they didn't want the old man around. So guess what? I'm going home. So I hop in the truck. I'm having one of those nights where you know how you're like, hey, what artist do I want to listen to? And I was like kind of craving some Elton John. So I put on his greatest hits playlist, put the truck in drive, hit play, and off I go. And about 3 songs in, the song Rocket Man comes on. And Rocket Man, you've heard that song probably dozens of times. You've probably sung it in the car on a road trip. But about 1 minute and 51 seconds in, this line is sung. Elton John sings, "Mars ain't the kind of place to raise your kids." And I'm thinking to myself when I hear that, like a bomb is going off in my mind. And I'm thinking to myself, oh my goodness, Mars ain't the kind of place to raise your kids. It feels like I'm raising my kids on Mars compared to a decade ago or 20 years ago. It just feels like a different world. So I wanted to know, like, why was this song written this way? And so Bernie Taupin is Elton John's writing partner who wrote most of Elton John's songs. Bernie said this in an interview. He said Rocket Man was actually inspired by a series of short stories from Ray Bradbury from his science fiction book, short stories called The Illustrated Man. In that book, there was a story called The Rocket Man, which was about how astronauts in the future would become like some sort of everyday job. So I just kind of took that idea and ran with it. So it's interesting because at the time this was written in 1971, it was published in 1972. What we have to remember about the US culture of that time is that space race was right in the center of our culture. We just landed on the moon in July of 1969. So this song was written really in the shadow of all of that, right? So this idea of space race was just huge to our culture. But here's what's interesting. Let's look at the three lines that follow. Mars ain't the kind of place to raise your kids. The next line is, in fact, it's as cold as hell, and there's no one there to raise them if you did. And all the science I don't understand. It's just my job 5 days a week. So let's break these lines down one by one. What do we call it when we say someone is being as cold as hell, right? In fact, it's as cold as hell. That's loneliness and isolation. Mars is lonely and isolated. Then he says, and there's no one there to raise them if you did. What is it? What do we call that when there's no one around to watch the kids? We call that neglect or abandonment. And this last line, it makes me think of the documentary that came out during the beginning of the global pandemic about our smartphone devices and all the apps within them, called the Social Dilemma. That documentary was making the points that we made this technology, we put it in the hands of our young people. It's the largest social experiment, technological social experiment ever in the history of mankind, and we don't even know the outcomes yet. We are in over our heads with technology we don't fully understand. So Mars ain't the kind of place to raise your kids is saying we are lonely and isolated. Mars is lonely and isolated. It's filled with neglect and abandonment. We're in over our heads with digital technology we don't fully understand. Mars ain't the kind of place to raise your kids, but it's exactly where we are today. This is Mars. Folks, we are in new territory in terms of raising our kids. So let's kind of dig into this. This is the world we're living in today. We're doing children's ministry. We're doing youth ministry. We're doing parenting on Mars. We're in unknown new territory. So therefore, we need to gain some insight in how all this is shaping us. How should we move forward? Although some things about us are universal and they never change, our environment has changed. So we need some insight to help us move forward. So as we think about children's ministry, we're gonna share with you some insights that we've discovered and a couple of problems that we've identified that will help us move into a different future. So our organization loves to learn. Like I said, we've commissioned 8 research projects over the course of the last 9 years. We're in the middle of the 8th one right now, but the 7th one was one we conducted with the Barna Group. We just got the findings this past several months. And matter of fact, the project that this is pulling from releases in June. So that's coming out very soon. So let's take a look at 2 findings that came from this project. The first one is this: children's ministry leaders lack confidence in their impact. If you're in children's ministry and you're feeling like, I just don't feel like I'm having that much impact, or metaphorically, you're looking at your toolboxes and you're just going like, where are the tools that work, right? If you're feeling this, then I want you to know that we heard you in the research. We heard that voice. So let's take a look at that. Let's drill into the data. So let's keep your eyes kind of right here in the middle where my cursor is, which says, how influential do you feel each of the following are on a child's development? That was the question being asked. Now zoom up to the top. But compared to churchgoers, attendees, right, like church members, ministry leaders are half as likely to feel like the church, its leaders, and its services for children are influential on a child's development. Now take your eyes all the way to the left of the screen. The ministry leaders are in the blue, churchgoers are in the yellow, and you can see that they both categories of people taking the survey, they both rated parents and guardians, friends, and social media as being relatively high in terms of influential. Now go over here to the far right and look at church leaders. So the church, what's inside this green box is measuring the church leaders, and church services for children. The church leaders rated all of these at the rock bottom level. Like church leaders are saying about themselves as kids pastors or children's ministry directors, I just don't think what I'm doing at the church for our services for children or myself, like I don't feel like I'm having that much of an impact. So this is a bit of a stunning admission. It's a punch in the gut to all of us to realize that this is collectively what we're saying as the children's ministry community. So, but let's move on to something a little more hopeful, because guys, there is something we are doing that is having tremendous impact. Children's ministry leaders, there's something you're doing that has big impact. So what is it? It is relational ministry with children. Look at that top headline. This is measuring a positive, meaningful relationship with a mentoring adult. So in research, there's kind of a little technique you do when you're trying to get at understanding a data point, where if you can take asking the same question two different ways and stack that data on top of each other, and then segment out the people who said yes to both. So look at here. This data point is saying yes, other than yourself as a parent, does your child have a positive, meaningful relationship with an adult in your church? And it's saying, is it completely true that my child, or it is completely true that my child has a meaningful relationship with a mentoring adult? So this 40% of children in our US churches who do have a loving, caring adult at their church in addition to their parent, that's the good news, right? The bad news is 60% don't. But so what we did by double validating here, by making sure this is right, is just to see it, get this as accurate as possible. But let's look at the next slide, which has a lot of data, but I want you to just kind of drill in on the bar chart. Look here, the green compared to the gray. The green are those children who do have a positive relationship. The gray are those who don't, right? So children with a meaningful relationship with an adult are more likely at church to have a child or have a friend at church. Their church matters to their child. My child looks forward to church. Children's ministry is the highlight of their week. Let's keep going. They're 3 times more likely to be rooted in scripture, memorizes the Bible, understands the big picture of the gospel in the Bible, reads or studies the Bible on their own, right? And then look at this last one. What's the point here between the gray and the green? The point is, it's not even close. If you're looking for kids who make a lifelong commitment to Jesus, or who better understand the needs of the poor, how to engage in the church and their community, it's highly relational ministry. So what's the point here? The point here is we're looking at our toolboxes and we're feeling like we don't have as many tools as we used to. Things aren't working. Children's ministry isn't that influential. But when we dig in a little deeper, we find out, listen, if lasting faith in children is what we're looking for, there's a segment of children that tend to be thriving in their faith a little more than others. What is that? It's because they have a parent and someone at church. They have someone else at church who's engaging with them spiritually. So those are the 2 insightful findings. And I think what we can take away from that is relational ministry. Having adult disciple makers engaging with kids is important. But here's 2 problems that we have to acknowledge. The first one, as we get into it, it's been said that it's not a matter of are our kids being formed, it's a matter of whom or exactly what is forming our children. So with that being in mind, let's describe the culture that's forming all of us. So 3 columns: past, present, future. In the past, we were a quasi-Christian culture, meaning we had convictional Christians, congregational Christians, and cultural Christians who all thought similarly about the major assumptions about the world. You know, the Bible was really well respected. Billy Graham was like the most popular human being. The church was a prominent place in our community. So what's happening here in the past was we all thought very similarly about all these things and right and wrong. But a convictional Christian, those are people like us. We believe that we are rooted in the scripture. We're centered on the gospel. We're modeling our lives after Jesus, right? That's a convictional Christian. A congregational Christian is someone who says, hey, I'm a member of a church. I go half a dozen times a year. A cultural Christian is someone who says, hey, I was born in the United States. My granddaddy was a preacher. Therefore, I'm a Christian, right? So what's happening here in the present is convictional Christians are feeling a cultural gap or a cultural divide between us and other people who call themselves Christians, but who actually affirm more of secular ideology. So this shift, what's important to notice here from left to right is we're moving from the past quasi-majority Christian culture in the United States to the future, in the present, the future, where we're becoming what? So let's give some language to this shift. Let's give a couple of quotes here. One word we could give to this shift is called secularism. What is secularism? Secularism is the dismissal of God and emphasis on individualism. This is saying we're going to diminish God, or we're going to even try to quote unquote silence God, or you've heard the phrase God is dead, right? This is the dismissal of God, and all of the emphasis is on self. So this is kind of the dominant worldview of our day. So what's happening here is we've moved from a quasi-Christian culture to a post-Christian culture. So what is a post-Christian culture? A post-Christian culture is a reaction against Christian culture. So it's an attempt to advance the goals of Christianity without Christ. It's the kingdom without the king. This is by Pastor Mark Sayers of Red Church in Melbourne, Australia. It's a great quote. He's got some really good books. You should check out Reappearing Church. It's amazing. You're going to like it. But this quote here is helping us understand that post-Christian culture is kind of like a bouquet of flowers. A bouquet of flowers has been cut off from its root system. Those flowers, if you think of those as being the goals or the fruit or the outcomes, but those goals, fruit, or outcomes of that bouquet are only going to last for so long. You put them in a vase, you put that bouquet in a vase, it's going to last 3 to 10 days max, right? And then those flowers are completely dried out and they're dead, right? Even though you're trying to care for them, they've been cut off from their root system. A post-Christian culture wants those goals and objectives of Christianity, like freedom, like justice, love, joy, peace, happiness, restoration, all of these things that come from where? They come from a triune God. They come from the scriptures. But a post-Christian culture says, hey, we want those same things. We want justice. We want love and freedom. We just don't want Jesus. We don't want the Bible. We don't want your God, all that kind of stuff. So here's why this is important. A post-Christian, all of us in humanity are being formed by 3 primary areas: community, meaning, and freedom. Community is our relationship with other people. Meaning is our longing and our desires for purpose and the conversion of information into wisdom, into how that informs our future and how we live. And then you got freedom over here. We all have free will. We all want to do something. Businessmen start businesses because they have a will to do something. Pastors start ministries because they want to make an impact. So we have this need for free will and to act upon that. We call those same 3 areas, I'll go back and forth here. We call those same 3 areas belong, believe, become. These 3 areas are working together to form identity. So what's happening in the secular world in these same 3 areas: belong, that's that community piece; believe, that's that meaning piece; become, that's that freedom area. What we have here is in the belonging area, instead of like the great commandment, belonging to God and belonging to his community, the church, what's happening here is the secular world is saying, no, there is no God. You develop affections for the ways of this world. It's the outcome of naturalism, meaning all that matters is what's here. And so that's really like idolatry, right? Like it's saying, cut off God, you develop affections for this world and the ways of this world. And then in the believe component, or remember going back here to community, meaning, and freedom, or belong, believe, become. So in that believe portion, it's about worldview. It's about our thinking, about how do we understand what meaning and purpose is. So what's happening here is the secular world is saying your worldview should be rooted where? In your own morality, self, and the constant changing thinking of the times. And it's, by the way, if you think that things have changed in secular culture the last 15 years, buckle up. It's going to keep changing the next 15 years. Pastor John Tyson of New York City, a Bible-believing guy, deeply committed to the scriptures, says secularism is here and it's here to stay. We should not expect that it's going to vanish. Our job is to be rooted as disciples in the midst of that. So that's what's happening in the believe, or in the meaning portion, and in that become portion, or that freedom portion that we have free will to act. What are we to act upon? Well, what's happening here is it's developing allegiance to your best self or your own personal happiness. Again, what do you see here? You see personal autonomy or hyper individualization. What does this look like? It looks like this: you be you. Live your truth. You are enough. Self, my body, my choice. This is the world we're living in today. So how should all this inform how we do children's ministry? Pastor Darren Whitehead says we must begin with the assumption that our children are being overly exposed with worldly discipleship and underexposed with biblical discipleship. So if you're new to children's ministry, this is your starting spot. If you're a veteran in children's ministry, this is your reset. This is the world that we're living in today. So that's the first problem. The first problem is that we've shifted from a quasi-majority Christian culture of the past to a highly secularized post-Christian culture of the now. The second thing we got to know is, guys, we're up against a deadline. We are up against a deadline. We've all seen the stat before. The the percentage or the stats of those who leave the church after high school, right? We've seen this work by the Barna Group research firm before. We could call this the church's canary in the coal mine, meaning, the canary in the coal mine is this idea that our great grandfathers, when they would go down under the earth in the coal mines to do really hard manual labor, they would take a canary and put it in a cage and bring it into the coal mine. Why? Because that canary is going to be hypersensitive to the deadly gases. So without a canary, if the deadly gases are there, the adult men may not realize that, and the gas may just be a silent killer, right? But with that canary there, that canary is like a dashboard. When that canary falls over dead and dies, poor canary, but when that canary falls over and dies, that's like a sign. It's like the dashboard blinking, there's a problem, right? That this canary is a symbol of what's happening with 18-year-old and post 18-year-olds in the church after high school. It's that symbol that says, hey, there's something wrong. There's a silent killer. What's causing our young people to leave the church? So that's really the meaning and the metaphor here. So the question is, what's leading to that? Like, the point of the canary in the coal mine is not the moment the canary falls over and dies. It's what deadly gas led to that. So as we think about the church and children and students, let's pay attention to this Barna stat that says a person's worldview is primarily shaped and is firmly in place by the time someone reaches the age of 13. If this is the guys, this data point is so huge. If this is true, it's not, our goal is not 18. Our deadline is now 13. We're not preparing high schoolers to leave the college at age 8 or leave for college at age 18. We're preparing by the time worldview is set, which is largely at age 13. Well, who is today's 13-year-old? Today's 13-year-old is the new kid in your youth group, right? It's like the middle schooler in your youth group. 2 years before that same child was the 11-year-old graduating out of our children's ministries. 3 years before that, they were the 8-year-old in the heart of your children's ministry. So what is the point of the canary in the coal mine metaphor? It's what deadly gas led to the expiration of the bird, or as it relates to our students, what process led to them leaving the church? Or flip that coin over and say, what process led to them being a resilient disciple? And so as we think about the Barna stat, at age 13 is when worldview is developed. I think what the Barna Group is actually saying is we're up against a deadline, and it's earlier than we thought. Child discipleship is the most strategic, formative, future-forward work of the church. It's super important. So children's ministry, here's the big point. Children's ministry needs a new map. Children's ministry of today is built off of assumptions from prior decades. So let's talk about this a little bit. We talk about this idea of generations, talked about at the beginning, and our generations have different views on mapping technology. So just for a moment, let's use another metaphor of mapping technology. Some of you remember these maps, the Rand McNally. It was so big. It was such a huge book that when you opened it up in the front seat of your car, it pretty much covered up the whole windshield, and mom and dad couldn't see out the front windshield to drive. Very dangerous device, But these were the maps of the kind of the baby boomers and Xers. But then fast forward to 1989, and the Xers, younger siblings were seeing the older millennials were seeing these, right? This was the Garmin. So boomers probably were the early adopters to the Garmin GPS technology. Then fast forward to 1997, you had Maps Quest, where you could print your maps out. You didn't even need to buy a book. You could do it right from your printer in your house. Then in 2012, Google Maps, and of course Apple Maps. Of course, we have Google and Waze and others. But this last year, I came across this map. My wife and I did. This is a map from the 1500s brought to us by the Italians. I can imagine this was a well-funded project, a well-funded endeavor and exploration to produce this map. And so I got to thinking, like, hey, what would we say to these map makers? Like if we could bring these map makers back from the dead and bring them on this Zoom call, what would we say to them? I think we would say, thank you. with limited mobility, limited visibility, compared to the technology we have today, like, look at what you created. That's amazing. I think what we would not say is y'all are a bunch of idiots. Look at how off you were. Like, no, we would never say that. We would not shame them. We would thank them. But here's the thing. If our child educators today were still using this map, we'd be outraged. We'd be like, what are you doing? Like, this is outdated information. This is going to lead to long-term consequences in navigation and understanding geopolitical boundaries and all this kind of stuff. Like this is a problem because this is outdated information. And in children's ministry today, we have a similar problem. We're using old maps. Children's ministry needs a new map. We have more information now than we did when the old map of children's ministry was created. We have more information about mental health. We have more information about entertainment and edutainment that we use a lot of with children. We have more information about mobile technology and how all that's forming them. We have more information about how engaged parents are or are not. We have more information about how much they need the church community to come around them, even if that's only 2 Sundays or 4 Sundays a month. Those moments can have big impact. Children's ministry of today was built in 1980s, 1990s assumptions. It was built in pre-2007, the year this came out to the market. It was built in pre-2007 assumptions, but we're still operating off of that map. But it's time to move forward to a new map. And by the way, there are connections between the new map and the ancient map. The map we've been using in recent decades is modern new. We need a new future forward that's attached to ancient and tried and true ways of discipling children in any culture, but especially in a post-Christian, highly secularized culture. So at the Child Discipleship Forum, which we extend that conversation, we'd love to have you guys join us there. We're so grateful to be able to be a part of this conversation with you. We're really going into the future side by side together. I think the best thing we can do is stay together and continue dialoguing and praying together as a community as we continue to build the new map of children's ministry together. Grateful for each of you, and God bless you as you do the best, most important strategic work of the church.